guys, and Happy New Year! I don't know if I'm gonna upload this either on December 31st or January 1st, but whichever day, it just seems nice to say Happy New Year. It is either already 2019 or almost 2019. Today's video is super exciting and special because I've never actually filmed one of these before, even though I've been on booktube now for like a year and a half, but it's going to be my top 10 favorite books that I read in the year of 2018. So I went through all like the whopping 35 books that I read this year and picked out 10 that I kind of put in order, but really like all of these books I just really love. But I am gonna start from, I guess, my least favorite, but it's still a favorite, to my most favorite, which is like, it's such a good book. And I actually kind of tried to match the book. So if you've watched any of my wrap-ups within the past 2 of my wrap-ups, I think, then you'll probably know what my #1 book that I read this year is. But yeah, I'm gonna save it for the end of the video in case you don't. So I don't think there's anything else to say in the intro that I need to. Oh, did I say that not all of these books were published this year? It's just that I read them this year for the first time. I mean, some of these books were 2018 releases, but then some of them are much older too, so yeah. Alright, let's just get into it. So coming in at number 10 is Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. This is actually the only young adult contemporary book on this list, right? I think so. Yeah, it is, which is crazy. But I read a few this year that I really just didn't like, but this still remains to be one of my favorite genres. But anyway, Love and Gelato follows this girl named Lena who goes to Italy one summer after her mother has recently passed away from cancer. She meets her dad for the first time, and she just has to kind of come to grips with the fact that she has lost her mom, but she's now meeting her dad, who she has never met her entire life, and his name is Howard. And let me just say, as a 22-year-old, almost 23-year-old girl, I really loved Howard, like a lot. Like, I was more interested in him than Lena's love interest. I think his name was Lorenzo, but he went by Ren in the book. So yeah, if you're like an older reader of YA contemporary, read this just to experience how great of a dad Howard is. I just love him. But anyway, I just thought this book was not only really cute and perfect for a spring summer contemporary, it does pack an emotional punch because it goes into Lena's feelings about losing her mom, and there's like a sentence in the book that really struck me when I read it towards the end where it was like, she's talking about missing her mom, and I want to say it's, I miss her so much sometimes, I sometimes wonder how I'm breathing, or something like that. I don't think it had the word sometimes twice in the sentence. But yeah, that sentence, it just like, you know you've missed somebody if it's after a breakup, or you're just long distance is keeping you apart, or the death of a loved one. You can just really relate to it. So I really liked this book for that. Like, it's not all fluff. There is insta-love, which is why this book got a 4.5 out of 5 stars from me, because I do not like insta-love whatsoever. But if you can look past that, I think you can really enjoy this. The insta-love isn't too bad. I mean, they do know each other for like a week, but still, it's just a week. Moving on now to the 9th book on the list. That is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is a book when I first read it way back, I think I read it in April of this year. I really didn't think it was gonna be one of my top 10 favorites when I was reading it, because the first half was really slow for me, but the second half was just amazing. It was fabulously done. If you are familiar with The Cruel Prince, you guys probably are, because it's like all over YouTube. Booktube, sorry, not YouTube, Booktube. This is a YA fantasy book about this girl named Jude and her sister Taryn, who's horrible, and then her older sister Vivi? Oh, I can't, I already forgot her name. They live in this land of fairy called Elfheim, and the fairies in Elfheim do not like humans. They do not regard them, have no respect for them. They consider themselves much above humans. So Jude, who is a human and our main character, has had to really fight for any sort of say in their world. She is like, I think she's 17, and there's like this royal prince that goes to the same like school that she goes to in Elfheim, and she just has like this rivalry and hatred toward him. So like I said, when I read this book for the first time, the only time I've read this book. The first half was kind of slow. I mean, it's setting up a lot of the story. There's a lot of political relations that we go into and learn about. There's like a whole bunch of family members of the royal family in this fairy world, and we're learning about them, how they relate to one another, who's the good side, bad side. But that's one thing that I just loved about this book, was the morally gray characters. You never really could tell who was on the good side or the bad side, if there even is one. I think every side in this book is like just definitely a gray side, has its like pros and cons on being on which side you want to be on. I don't know if I'm explaining this good at all, but I thought this book was great. The second half was phenomenal, and I would honestly recommend it just for you guys to experience. I wouldn't say there's a plot twist. You know, there is a plot twist, but like, it was just astoundingly good. I cannot wait for The Wicked King. Comes out January 8th, so I will definitely be picking that one up and reading it probably immediately. The next book coming in at number 8 on my list is Dreaming with God by Sarah Beth Marr. This is a Christian nonfiction book that I read back in April, I think, too. April was like a really good month for me, I guess. But this is all about kind of surrendering your desires to God, and just like what you hold on to, you know, those passions that can kind of hinder your relationship with Him. That's kind of what this book is talking about. I feel like I said kind of a lot, I'm sorry. I thought this book was so eye-opening, and it helped me grow more aware of just how much I felt like I needed to be in control of my life, and how I feel like I needed to know what was going to happen next and then what was going to happen after that. And it's just kind of like giving up your ideas for the future and surrendering them to God. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought the author had such a sweet way of writing and sharing her own personal testimony. So I would definitely recommend it if you are looking for something that was anything like this, what I just said. Okay, so the next 2 books I'm going to talk about are actually a part of the same series. I read them this year. It is now one of my like favorite young adult series. It's crazy how much I like this series, just because I didn't think I was into this genre, but yeah, after reading these books, I feel very differently now, and all I want to read now is like sci-fi YA. Probably not adult sci-fi yet, but I might get there one day. But anyway, coming in at number 7 is Obsidium by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is, like I said, a YA sci-fi. It's the 3rd concluding novel to the Illuminae series. If you haven't read the Illuminae series, I highly suggest you do. I think they are some amazing, action-packed, thrill ride, science fiction, space opera, adventure stories. I know that was probably just a lot of adjectives that didn't tell you much, but each book follows the perspective of 2 different characters. So Obsidium, the last one, follows the perspectives primarily of Reese and Asha. Was her name Asha? Now I'm not thinking that's her name. Yes, that's her name. It's Asha. They are actually, you know what? I don't even want to say that, just in case you haven't read this series. Basically, it's about this little tiny ice planet named Corinza that gets pretty much blown up by this corporation called Bitech, and they want what they're mining on this planet. It's called Hermium, I think. I'm already forgetting like the little details. I do want to reread this series. But yeah, they really want to mine it for themselves because it's really profitable, but it is illegal. So the people on Corinza are fleeing the planet, but Bitech doesn't want anyone to remember what happened, so they sent a ship called the Lincoln out to chase all the refugees fleeing Corinza, and that's pretty much what all 3 books are about. Them trying to find safety and also trying to let other people know about what happened, because Bitech is really going to all the extremes to cover it up. So yeah, this was the 3rd book. Great conclusion. I really did like it. And so moving on now to the 6th book on this list is Gemina, the 2nd book. I liked Gemina just a little bit more than Obsidium. I mean, as much as I love these books, I gave them all 5 stars. Obsidium, I'm not gonna lie, was kind of like, it was wrapped up really nice and neat. And I don't know, I guess I wanted a little bit more, I don't know, drama, but there was so much drama anyway. I don't really know what I was wanting, but anyway, I liked Gemina just a teensy bit more than Obsidio just because I loved Nikolai's character. I did really like Hannah too. It did suck that Ezra and Katie weren't the primary focus, but I do think Hannah and Nikolai did a great job holding their own in this book. I'm talking about them as if they're like real people. But anyway, this book, yeah, like I said, continues that chase. This one primarily takes place on this jump station called Heimdall, and that is where all the refugees from Carinza are trying to get to so they can jump to like another dimension of space or whatever. But in this book there's like these alien eggs that are like hatching, and it's just really interesting because they're like, I guess, automatically hell-bent on killing people. So yeah, I liked this one just as much as the first one, Illuminate. It's just such a great series. I highly recommend it so much. Coming in at number 5 is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. This is the second book to her first adult sci-fi superhero anti-villain novel, Vicious. I have talked about it a lot on my channel recently because I read Vengeful back in October, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was such a great second novel, especially since when she first released or published Vicious, there was no talks of being a sequel. Like when I read Vicious back in 2014, there was like, this wasn't even a thought. Like there wasn't any talk about there being a second book to that first one, Vicious. So even though Vicious didn't technically need a sequel, it has one now, and it's great. It follows a couple new characters, Marcella and June, and a few others, but Marcella and June are like the primary new characters that have these extraordinary abilities, and Marcella is such an interesting character. How you feel about her at the beginning changes as you read the book. I will let you guys figure that one out when you read it, because I highly suggest you do, obviously. And I just thought the pacing in this book was really well done. She kept the chapters really short, and the characters, even though you might not have done what they were doing in certain situations, you still understood like why they were making the decisions they were making. And I really like that. I love reading about characters that I might not necessarily identify with, but I can understand. So she has very understandable characters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yes, I won't go too much into obviously the plot because this is the sequel to Vicious, and I think Vicious is such a good start. I guess in this new series, is there gonna be a third one? And if there is, it needs to be all about June and her like origin story and how she became extraordinary. Because if you read this book, then you probably have a lot of June questions too. But yeah, this one was number 5. Now on to the 4th book. That is Kisses from Katie by Katie Davis. This is a girl's memoir about leaving Nashville, Tennessee and her very upper middle class lifestyle to go live in Uganda and take care of these children that are living in extreme poverty. She buys this home for them. She adopts like 12 or 13 little girls. She clothes them, feeds them, provides like medicine and health for them. It's such an inspiring read. I think if you just are at all interested in reading about what life is like over there, it's kind of like Dreaming with God for me. It was very eye-opening, and I just loved reading about just their strength and their faith that they kept in God, even though they have like absolutely nothing along what we have here in America. Like, what is a fast food restaurant over there? Like, they don't have cell phones, like, but that stuff doesn't seem to matter to them. So reading about it was just like, it made me feel so ungrateful for what I have, because these people have so much less than I do, and yet they just are so joyous. And Katie writes about it, obviously, that's how I know. I have never been to Uganda, but it definitely put up a desire in me to definitely go one day, at least for some amount of time of a mission trip. I don't know about actually moving there, but just really anywhere that you can help out at. It just really is a great read and will get you hopefully inspired to do more even in your own community. But yeah, this is such a good book. Just loved it a lot. So it's totally about to rain where I'm at. I did not know that this was going to happen, so if the lighting is just all over the place, I do apologize. Now the next 3 books were really hard for me to put in a type of order, but I have, but like they are all so close together in my liking for them. So this 3rd book I'm going to talk about, or coming in at number 3, was probably the biggest surprise 5-star I've ever given a book before, because when I went into the book I was not expecting to give it 5 stars. I don't ever go into books like not expecting to like them at least, but like this book I was just expecting it to be kind of like a, oh, that was pretty good, but like I love this book. It's so good. And that is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I actually read this at the beginning of November, so I haven't even talked about this in a wrap-up yet, but I will talk about it in my November and December wrap-up if that's not already up, but it probably won't be, but it might be. But anyway, I loved this book. This took me by, like I said, such a surprise because it is so outside of my comfort zone. The author did such a good job at creating this very subtle creeping of terror. It's so good how like just unassuming it was at first. I'll say up until chapter 13 I was like, oh, this is okay, I can handle this, because before going into it I had heard this book described as like a horror novel, which I mean after reading it I would say it's definitely much more of a thriller novel than a horror, but it is very like this blurb says, Hitchcockian, because it's all about what's not revealed on the page and more like what you're conjuring up in your mind that is so creepy and scary. So this book excels at doing that. There were, like I said, chapter 13 was the start of some chapters where I was like clutching the pages. There were chapters even at the end of this book, like when it was the most intense, where I literally, and I've never done this before when reading it, but I literally was reading it through like the corner of my eye. I was like this reading some chapters because I just knew what was coming, but I didn't want it to come, and it was so good. I loved that experience. So I couldn't help but give it 5 stars for this book doing what it intended probably to do, which was to terrify me but also make me care for these characters even when I knew what was going to happen to them all. It's amazing. If you want a thrill ride of a book, this psychological terror, for what the blurb says, I would highly, highly recommend it. And I'm still so shocked this came in at number 3. I just don't think I can stress to you guys enough how much this book is so not up my alley, but maybe it is. Maybe I need to start reading a whole lot more thriller, not horror, but like psychological thriller novels. So yes. Coming in at number 2 is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. I read this book way back in January, so it's been quite a while since I last read it, but I still remember it very well. It's obviously was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. This is, in case you don't know, a young adult historical fiction novel, but it's like transcends the young adult like age range. This book can be read by absolutely anybody. I mean, really any book can be read by anybody, but like this had such a particular writing style that was so like different from any other YA book that I've ever read, really any other book in general that I've ever read, because it's written from the perspective of Death himself, pretty much like the Grim Reaper, and he's just recounting the events that happened in World War II on this street, Himmel Street, in the made-up town of Molking, Germany. But there is a real town called Olking, Germany, which I think Molking is based off of, just, I mean, assuming name association. But anyway, we primarily follow this girl named Liesel who steals some books from, was he like the mayor of their town? His like personal library, and she reads them and she learns how to read. But I mean, it's World War II. In Nazi Germany. I think you can imagine like what goes on in this book. It is thicker, but it's such an important read. It's such a good read. It makes you feel so deeply for the characters in this book. I was very much attached to Papa Huberman, and I cried so hard during the last 50 pages of this book. I cried so hard that I got my mom's attention. She read it after me and she cried too. So this is a book that will definitely pull at your heartstrings and make you very emotional, but in the best way. And finally, the last book, which is actually the best book I've read this year. If there was ever a book that I would say felt tailor-made for me, it's this book. Because, and I say that because this book I don't think is one that will appeal to everybody. It's a very particular, I think, niche type of a read, if that makes any sense. But that's The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book has so much hype. A lot of people love this book. I am very happy to say I'm one of them, but I have seen a couple people here on BookTube who read this who were just not impressed. And This is a book I got my mom also to read because I do that with books I really like, and she loved it too, but she was one of the ones that while she was reading it, she didn't really get it, but then when she finished it and everything came together and like she could see things as a whole, I guess, she like loved it. So this is definitely a slower burn of a novel. Everything is much slower paced. The romance, the character arcs, just the setting up of the Night Circus, which this book is so interesting in the fact that the setting is a character. The Night Circus in this book is not just a setting. It is like an enigma. It is a character in and of itself. It is based off of the other characters. It can only run by the other characters, if that makes any sense. Like Celia and Marco, our two main characters, are magicians who have been raised from childhood to compete in this lifelong duel, and only one of them can be left standing, so basically the other one like has to die or something. And they fall in love, so that kind of puts a little bit of a damper on the whole situation. If I could only describe this book in one word, I would say it's romantic. And I don't mean that in like a chick lit rom-com romance. I mean like that kind of deep, almost sensual like romance. Not sensual and like erotica, but like, I hope you guys know what I mean. It's that very just like, I don't know. I know I'm not translating it well with my facial expressions, but if I could describe this book using colors, I would describe it as the color of like a plum or a pomegranate. Like, if you guys think in colors or auras or whatever, think of kind of like that color. That's what I would give this book if this book was a color. That probably didn't make any sense. But yeah, it was enchanting, it was very magical, it was just, it swept me off my feet, it romanticized me. It like took me out for a date and got me some rosé and treated me to some breadsticks. But like the breadsticks that are even better than Olive Garden's breadsticks. Like it just was so my type of a book. So yeah, like I said, not a book for everybody, I don't think, but it was a 5 out of 5 star read for me, and I really want to reread it already soon, because I read this book back in September, I think, but yeah. So good. I don't know why it took me so long to read it, but I'm very happy that I have read it now, because it's like the love of my literary life. And those are the top 10 reads of 2018. For me, personally, I obviously didn't read every book ever, so out of the ones I did read, those would be my top 10 recommendations for you guys to check out, hopefully, if you're interested in any of them. And let me know some of y'all's favorite reads of 2018. I'm always on the hunt for good book recommendations and ones that really made an impact in your guys' lives. So yeah, just leave a comment down below if you want to, or if you guys have read any of these books and they ended up on your top 10 list of 2018, let me know too, because it's always great to find someone who shares some reading tastes. So yeah, I hope to see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye!